Hold on to your fucking shit. This week, Netflix debuted Reality Check Inside America's Next Top Model, in which everyone from Tyra Banks to the executive producer and the network exec gathered to wonder who was responsible for the many insane and toxic things, I'll call them war crimes, we saw play out on the iconic 2000s reality competition series. Nina, where to begin?
Ooh, child. First, I have to say, I'm very surprised Tyra sat down for this.
I don't get it. I mean, like, the degree of, Tyra, can you explain this sexual assault?
Yeah.
Tyra, can you explain treating this person like garbage?
Right.
And she just has to sit there and give, I'm going to call it pageant face.
She definitely gave there was one moment when they were asking her about Jay Manuel.
Yeah.
And it's obvious they don't speak. And when they asked about him, she goes, he's a lovely man. And I was like, oh, this is actually what makes her the craziest to me. Like, her response was, it like something went over her face and she smiled and she goes, I said, oh, this bitch is crazy.
Yeah, she was lost in the smiles.
It was more than anything else. I was like, this is weird. It's weird also because she still clearly has the media training from like the early 2000s that no longer works in this day and age, because we all have phones and minds and people have platforms where before you didn't have a platform. So everything had to be talked through PR. Now it's just so transparent. These girls can get on their phones, and it's just like she hasn't caught up to that. I do think she's stunted in like the early 2000s and hasn't evolved out of that, because when you're watching her and Ken Mock, who were the executive producers and creators of the show, are talking about it in third person like they weren't there making the decisions. So if me and you had a show 10 years ago and we did some shit and now people are asking us, and I would just be like, well, production. No, your production. You know, you were the executive producer, and I know some people are executive producers in name, but then she goes into detail about how she was sitting in the edit bays and now she knows how to edit. So you're telling us that you were part of this, but then in the same time, you're just kind of like, well, it was just the times, and then blames the viewer and tells us, well, y'all was watching it, and it's like, lady, I was 13. I'm so sorry. Like, I'm doing this in between homework sessions, and you blaming me. Like, it is a part of, I understand it was being consumed at the time, but I just felt like I walked away. Her and Ken Mock had absolutely no account. The accountability was in the negative.
Yeah.
It was hard to watch. I mean, there were sexual assaults. There were women who were saying that they had to alter parts of their body against their will. Like, this goes really deep, and it deserves way more than well, it was just a sign of the times. That's not going to get it.
Well, also, what's very weird is when this documentary starts, and it's a 3-part series. It's all on Netflix right now. Tyra begins by saying there was this reckoning in 2020 during the pandemic when people started discovering ANTM again and were stuck at home just watching it all day. And she said in that moment, people were criticizing the show and how exploitative it was of the women on it and stuff. And she goes, and I'm so glad they did that because that's how I learn. Because so she begins sort of establishing, I understand the show is like dicey in retrospect, but she doesn't, because she doesn't own up to it in any way. But I have to say, a theatrical thrill of watching this is the crazy newswoman posturing that Tyra Banks has while doing anything, while hosting the show, while like sitting here answering questions. She reminds me of, and this is a Robert Duvall reference, Faye Dunaway in Network. She's like, and it's literally the same story as what happens in that movie, which is we have the last place network. We've got to make this thing sing. How are we going to do it? We're going to, raise the stakes, make it crazier, make it weirder, make it uncomfortable. Yeah. And that's how it became a sensation. I mean, because, by the way, how many actual reality shows run that many seasons?
Right.
Let alone something like that started off so cheap.
Right.
And needed to...
And evolved into this, like, powerhouse. And I will say, it was a huge cultural phenomenon. I remember going home and watching it and said, like, I didn't have TiVo, I didn't have any of that. I remember watching this in real time. And I will say there was a pivotal moment on that show that actually affected me as a young woman, that stuck with me, that probably was instrumental in a decision I made as an adult. And it was the Danny situation about the Gap. So I had a Gap my whole life.
Me too as a kid.
And and I really struggled with it because I got bullied about it a lot. But my mom had one, my grandfather had one. So I would have a year where I loved it, a year where I didn't. And I'll never forget watching her show and her berate Danny about that Gap. And as a young woman watching the show, I cried. Like, I saw this Black woman that I admired talking about how no one would want this girl with a Gap. And it really messed me up. Like, as a young woman, it really messed me up. Regardless, if I see Tyra was on magazines in my house. So I'm seeing someone that I revere and a beauty icon telling me something about myself is unattractive and unmarketable. It did damage to me because I didn't have a ton of Black icons that I looked up to at the time, you know? And I think like it stayed in the back of my head. And then when I got on TV and people would troll me, that was the first thing they would say. And ultimately I made the decision to close it, and I'm not putting that responsibility on her, but I will say those things that they did went past just being on TV, especially for young Black women. It was impactful in the households where Tyra was one of the few examples of Black women who were successful on TV. And a lot of it was damaging to watch in real time. So when people say, well, no one was criticizing it back then, I think that was probably the first moment I thought, I don't feel good about watching this show. There wasn't social media to get on back then to criticize. So when people say it wasn't being critical, they were conversations about the show being damaging. It just wasn't going online because the platforms didn't exist.
Right. Yeah, this is pre-Twitter, et cetera. Sure. Tyra talks about going into chat rooms to discover what people were saying about the show, but you're right. We hadn't reached peak social media yet. There are some notable alumni. Eva Pigford, great ANTM contestant. Niall DeMarco also came from the show. And by the way, a fabulous talking head on this documentary is Ebony from season 1.
Oh, she was great.
And who was fabulous on the show.
Can we just also talk about how none of the Black women have aged at all?
I do have to say, like Danielle on the show, like, go ahead and compete again.
I was like, y'all could get back on that runway today.
Yeah.
Like, they looked incredible. Ebony, I was like, they were talking about Ebony's skin, and I was just like, I haven't seen more beautiful skin when she was saying that they were criticizing her about it. I want a second run for all of them to, like, get what is theirs.
Oh, yeah. And Ebony talks about having been an out lesbian on the show. In addition to being, a Black contestant on a show that didn't know how to deal with Black contestants. So I think this documentary properly gives her flowers. And by the way, everything she has to say is so fabulous,
I have to say, I thought this documentary was very well done.
Yeah.
I thought it was very well done.
Oh, imagine turning it off. I watched all 3 parts in quick succession. Yeah.
And I rarely don't watch and not pick up my phone. My phone was sitting down.
Yeah, no.
I paused a few times to post on threads about it. But other than that, and it is getting visceral reactions from everybody. So if you want something, if you just need to rage, watch this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you're ready to feel, get ready.
Yes, exactly.
Danielle, by the way, who is a winner of America's Next Top Model, is one of the highlights
she
of
was
the
phenomenal.
show. Oh, my God. Her delivering the story and remembering everything with such clarity.
Yes.
I imagine it's a total blitz filming this show. I'm really in awe of the models or former models they had in the show talking about their experience on the show. I also think she's right about Tyra when she says that when Tyra began the show, in the first, the initial moment creating the show, she probably had good intentions.
I agree.
And thought to herself, I'm one of the few Black supermodels, so I can run the show and, for instance, have half the cast be people of color. Which was pretty radical at the time. I always say about Project Runway too. Imagine having 9 gay guys on a show. These were all brand new things at the time. But then it immediately morphed after the ratings hit.
It did.
Into all these damaging things.
Yeah, it took, and this is what I will say. As being a person who's created things for TV, been in TV for a long time, these networks do come in and try to change the trajectory of the show and tell you things you need to do that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
We know they come in with these notes, the network notes, and they change things and they shift the purpose of the show because they want the numbers.
Yeah.
And I understand that kind of getting away from her. But it still doesn't explain to me certain pivotal things about her relationships, right? So I had no idea Miss J had a stroke in 2022.
Right.
Tyra has not visited this person that was such a pivotal part of her life for so many years. And in the documentary, they're like, has Tyra come to see you, visit you? And he's like, no. She says she texted me last week. And it's interesting that she would have texted him last week in the documentary because she knew he was doing this documentary.
Right.
Everything just feels very calculated. It feels like we lost who Tyra was, and she is kind of a cog in the machine now.
Yeah.
And she moves that way in her personal life, on TV. Everything is a soundbite or a motive. None of it feels authentic. And it's really hard for me I think a lot of people would do well with just an authentic conversation and apology. We've yet to really get that from her.
No. And also, again, I don't think anything is really preventing her from saying so much of the show is awful in retrospect.
Yeah.
Like, again, you're right. Like, the accountability isn't there, even though she's sort of gingerly approaching it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, they just kept saying it was a sign of the times, and they're not wrong. The early 2000s were crazy.
Oh, no, every time I watch a music video from that time, it's like you're watching some young woman look terrible.
Sure.
You know, and like being propped up and being sexed out in such a crazy, I'll call it maximalist way. You know, it's just unsubtle, you know.
But even, I will say, I felt trauma watching this because as a viewer, I was fully invested in the second season when Shandy was on the show in the second cycle.
Yeah.
And we all thought she cheated on her boyfriend.
Oh, yes. And by the way, I did not realize watching this that, like, it was sold to the viewer as she cheated as opposed to she was assaulted and doesn't remember it.
1,000%. She was not only sexually assaulted, but also like they witnessed it and did not step in.
Right.
And even now, Ken Mock is like, well, we filmed it like a documentary, so we just don't step in. That is not okay. And it's not a good enough. That's not good enough. That's not a good enough excuse. And then to hear that she was slut shamed in the streets and by people for basically like years. This poor woman is just still beaten up. She can't talk about it without crying. And then I feel, as a sense of watching the show for a decade, we thought this girl had cheated on her boyfriend, and find out we witnessed this sexual assault, and there's still no accountability about that. It's I'm gonna be honest, I was pretty livid watching that.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, the amount of like former contestants on the show who are interviewed here, and by the way, it's actually telling who doesn't even participate.
Right.
There's like not a
Tiffany was like, baby, find me later.
No, right.
She did not even come back for this. I have heard though that there is going to be another documentary that comes out in March. I don't think it's with the same production company. It's a different company that's doing it, that will be talking to other cast members that were not featured in this one.
Oh, okay.
So,
how very American Gladiator.
Right, exactly.
We got two different series. One had all the contestants,
There's a lot
one
of
didn't.
content to cover.
Yeah, tons of people. The amount of models on this show who are still clearly extremely upset by what happened on the show.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've ran into a couple of these women just being in the industry, and I won't say her name because I don't know if she wants me to tell her story, but we were at an award show and we just happened to be standing next to each other, and I was just telling her she had done something that I really enjoyed, and I was talking to her about it, and Tyra was also at the event, and so I said, oh, Tyra's here, and she was like, Like, it still was, there was no love between how she felt about, like, even now, years later, I mean, it has been over a decade since this woman had been on the show, and she's had a very successful career. She still was like, like, she was not feeling Tyra being there. She wasn't feeling being around her. So there's a lot of unresolved issues. And I'm always of the thing of like, when they forgive you, I'll forgive you. I say that about Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake. When Janet finally forgives Justin, so will I.
Right.
And that's how I kind of feel about it.
Well, by the way, we mentioned Jay Manuel earlier. The series gets into how he eventually wants to quit the show around cycle 8-9.
Yeah.
And he writes this long, heartfelt email to her, and you know, he's there from the beginning. They had a great rapport once upon a time, and she just responds with, "I am disappointed," and says nothing else. And then when they're on set, he's still they kind of cajole him to staying another year, and eventually he stays with the show in a different capacity for a few seasons, but then he's sort of just cut off too.
Yeah.
And like when they ask her like, do you want to talk about Jay Manuel? And she won't. It's like, Tyra, did you just expect him to stay with the show? Like, you're making 10 times the money he is.
Right.
Why are you feeling betrayed by this?
And it's just such a weird, there was like a clear power dynamic.
Yeah.
I mean, even the fact that she commented on, you know, the Jays getting more recognized than her when they were in New York. She was joking, but you could tell she was serious. Like, it affected her ego.
Yeah.
That like when they were together and they got, you know, recognized and she didn't, it was, you know, it was just very strange.
And also, clearly, that's anomalous. You're one of the most famous women in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say, I think a lot of people, because they're seeing the state, that there's clearly been a lot of evolving with Nigel, Miss J, and Mr. J. But I don't want to erase the fact that they were complicit in a lot of this too, because I think a lot of people are feeling sorry for Miss J right now because of his current medical state, and I do think that is something that is sad and we should have compassion for. But at the same time, if you watch back these clips, they were all pretty awful to these women in the comments and the fat shaming. And I just think, you know, when I watch shows like this and they're talking about women's bodies, and I'm like, what do you think 90% of your audience looks like?
Yeah.
Who do you think's watching the show? It's kind of crazy. I mean, they were calling a size 6 fat. Like, the amount of things that this did to young women's brains who watch this show. I mean, I can tell you how it affected me with size and my gap, right? So I can't imagine like everybody, all the other women this affected, like they're just how they felt about themselves. And I just think like there's a lot of atoning that needs to happen. And right now, I just feels like everybody's passing the buck.
Right. Also, by the way, I have to say, it almost would have been smarter for certain people not to have taken part in this documentary because, by the way, I would say Janice Dickinson almost skates by scot-free in this. They like they show a couple of sound bites of her, but she's not in the documentary.
Right.
So I don't know that they want to just get into what she brings to it. But I mean, some of the most scathing and ridiculous comments I've ever seen on, excuse me, a television.
Yeah.
All together. And actually, I'm going to include the internet.
Yeah. I mean, just Janice was, and you know, at the time we all thought she was shocking. She came across almost like Howard Stern, like the shock jock, you know, and it was criticized at the time. But, you know, as time has gone on, it's like Tyra has become a bigger villain than Janice, which is crazy because back then she was seen as the calm one. But then, you know, when you hear these things about like how Shandy went to Tyra's talk show, and even then, you know, she asked Tyra not to play something. Tyra played it. Like, Tyra is lost in the sauce and has been for many, many years. And I don't want to take away from what she has contributed to the world. But, you know, I want people to know that two things can exist.
Yeah, right. No, that was very shocking to see. First of all, Tyra's talk show has been kind of lost to time.
Yeah.
And that was one of those kind of like Meghan McCain on The View like situations where every week you would hear something utterly bizarre had occurred.
Yeah.
But you would have to see it, you know, in that kind of creepy, must-see TV way that feels now very, very retro.
And I think people forget how huge Tyra was back then because I think time has passed and things have changed so fast. But Tyra was everywhere. Let's not forget she was acting. She was in several movies.
Life Size? Oh, yes.
Coyote Ugly, Higher Learning, Love and Basketball. She was in movies. She was, you know, on magazines. She had the show. Like, she was huge. Like, Beyonce went on the Tyra Banks show. Like, this is...
I remember that
everybody
interview.
went on that, and that was...
Speaking of Faye Dunaway and Network, who put that line of questioning together? Where she says, here's a bunch of questions. She rhymes with the word Beyonce with other things, and then turns that into a question. This isn't one of the questions, but she's just like, you know, Fleance. Have you been to a flea market?
And, you know, and not for nothing, Tyra is a cornball.
I guess.
She's corny, and that's not a bad thing. So it's just like...
And actually, that's probably some of the best parts of America's Next Top Models. Like, her corny little acting moments.
She kind of, you know, awkward and corny.
Yeah.
And so she really, you know, to have her snap into this other person, I don't know which version of her I prefer.
Yeah.
Neither, probably. But, you know, it's also very shocking to watch.
Okay, now Project Runway and American Idol, etc., all have a couple of winners who actually vaulted ahead in their industries. I don't think America's Next Top Model really ever had one person pop off properly. Yeah, Winnie Harlow is as close as it gets.
Yeah, I would say Winnie, you know, Yaya is, I feel like, very active.
And she acted a couple of times.
Yeah. She's fully has a really good career. And then, you know, I think like Adrienne for a little while back then because she married one of the Brady Bunch guys.
Oh, I watched My Fair Brady.
I did.
Are you talking about Joliet, Illinois' Adrienne Curry?
That's the one.
Because I watched her on The Surreal Life and I watched her on My Fair Brady.
Yeah.
When I moved out here, my first boss goes, "You know who you sound like? Adrienne Curry."
Wow.
And I realized she's from the suburb next to me. Yeah. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Well done.
I mean, I bet we're forgetting somebody who was big, but if you know, those are who stand out to me. So it's almost, and they mentioned this in the film that like it kind of was, if the show was to make this next big supermodel, the show was kind of a failure.
Yeah.
You know what was the most shocking to me after all of this? Tyra promotes the next season, the next cycle.
Oh, no. Just being like, it's time for that, obviously.
I thought I heard Michael Myers behind her.
It's time for the Nuremberg trials. What are you talking about? It's not time for more of this.
Girl, who is watching this? Are you crazy doing a plug right now?
No.
We just talked about sexual assault and all these things, and you plug in the next and wait for cycle 25. Girl, get out my face.
And also with the same glassy stare, like more to come, like full, you know, Sunset Boulevard, like cycle
like,
25.
I don't even think my conscience would let me watch the next. I don't care what cycle. You could be cycle 100.
Yeah.
I am not tuning in because I don't know what this was to promote, especially if the same people are being involved in this next cycle. Keep it.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
I was gonna say, you know exactly where you are. I mean, I will say to wrap this conversation up. I think something that America's Next Top Model benefited from was never being prestige for a second.
Right.
Like a show like Project Runway had to figure out how to stay good and keep integrity. And even though like the network changed or whatever, like they were trying to keep like the integrity and the careerist nature of the show valid, whereas this show was like not even close to Emmy consideration, so they were just like, whatever, make the girl like jump through a hoop that's on fire.
It's like, let's have the girls switch races
and ethnicities. We haven't even touched on that.
Like, let's put them in a big bowl of salad. Like, what is happening here?
Excuse me, they had the girls switch races for one photo shoot, and there's some sort of reckoning at the time of how bizarre that is, and then they do it again 8 cycles later or something. They're like, not only have we not learned, it's a classic.
And then brought in the ethnicities of the children and had them pose with the kids. Yeah. I'm like, we bringing babies into this? This is outrageous. This is, I don't know when I clocked out of watching this show, but it was really culturally, for, the pop culture wise, it's one of the most ridiculous things that has ever happened.
Oh yeah, no, I have to laugh though. Somebody, one of the commentators on the show said, "Oh, I finally, I stopped watching. It got really desperate near the end." Excuse me, it was never not desperate. It began on desperation.
Near the end.
It's the desperate housewife Tyra Banks.
And the poor girls were all basically like, I went back to Walgreens.
Yeah.
I went and the one thing I will say is probably the realest is how cold this industry is.
Yeah.
Because if anybody is thinking about getting into entertainment, and watch this, because it's very real about how Hollywood is hot and cold, and it will cut your head off and not wait for your body to drop. Like, Hollywood is cold.
Yeah.
And I really want people to know that show business does not love you. And so if this is something you're interested in, that show is a perfect example of how this industry can break your heart.
It epitomizes it.
Yes, it does.
That's kind of the most classic thing about this is like what happens to the contestants on this show is an age-old story.
It's
but
so
it still
true.
Feels so vicious watching it.
It is cutthroat. But I've had stuff like that happen to me in this industry, and I've seen people come and go. I'm sure you have too, where like they're like, I'm done. And there are some people who are just like, I have no desire to come back into that world. And some people who just, they keep going, and you deal with the trauma. And I think,
or you don't,
or you don't, Tyra. No, but I think rightfully so. I do think this is a rightful dragging of her. Mm-hmm. And the end where she's kind of blaming everybody and saying like, I'll take my dragging, but you be prepared to take yours because my moments were filmed. And it's like, she's still diverting. Yeah. Like, we are talking about you.
And you ran the show. It was your idea. You keep taking charge of this idea. Keep saying it was your idea.
Right. It's either was all you or it wasn't. You can't. And I will say, like, I do think the networks are the biggest villains here. I'm being honest.
Sure. No, because we didn't ever hear from their higher ups.
No, of course not. No, because they're about to do this another cycle.
Right. The only higher up we really hear from is UPN head Dawn Ostroff, who was there at the beginning. Sure. But even she, I don't feel like, is answering the big questions here.
No, they're all just kind of acting like it was someone else. It just, again, passing the buck. Like, it was the producers, it was the editors, it was the higher ups. It's like, who's making these decisions?
Right. One of the higher ups we did not hear about in this show, co-creator of America's Next Top Model, Kenya Barris.
I had no idea about this.
He's not grownish at all. He made the show.
He's not getting any flack for this.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, it's interesting no one's mentioned his name in all of this. I had no idea.
He's extremely famous and extremely successful.
Yes. And he's pretty much skated by without anybody posing any type of criticism to him. I had no idea. He has done a really good job of bearing that, but now we know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I have hopes for that other documentary coming out.
Yeah. I'm interested to see who's going to be attached and who's producing it, because that matters a lot.
Yes.
If it stays like this where it feels more in the middle, I'm really inclined to watch. I'd probably watch any documentary on this right now.
I guess I would too.
Yeah.
I want to establish, when you're watching this documentary, at first, you almost think Tyra's producing it. And then as it goes on, you realize, oh wait, she has no control.
Sure.
So, I mean, just enjoy the theatrical thrills of that.
It's in just watching her, it's really a masterclass in like denial.
Yeah, right.
They mentioned Les Moonves though, which I thought was interesting.
Yes. Oh no, and of course he's one of the scariest people ever to live.
Yes.
We were just talking about Big Brother before the camera started rolling, and God, what a disease that continues to be that I have. Yeah.
Listen, and I worked at CBS.
Oh gosh, the price is wrong.
And I was definitely told I was too black.
Oh, okay. Well,
yes.
I mean,
but that checks.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it was a note from him, but it was definitely a note from someone in that sphere.
Sounds like less to me. Less is more, shall we say.
Clearly. So
oh my God.
when they brought him on, I was like, I'm getting PTSD all through this thing.
Oh my God.